travelers, and welcome to The Way of the Showman, where we view the world through the lens of showmanship. I am Captain Frodo, and I will be your guide and your host along this episode of The Way. And as you might remember from the previous episode, we have started a new project here on the podcast, and it is the exploration of showmanship as play. And last episode we sketched out in a big introduction the nature of some of the complicated things that might occur when you try to look for the origins of something. If you're looking for the very deep origins of something, then those origins will necessarily be different from what that thing is today. They're not always the same, but by understanding where it came from, we can sometimes learn very interesting and useful things, and that is what we are aiming to do here. I am today because to understand then what something was in its beginning, we need to nail down what features it is that we're going to trace back, because showmanship has many features which we will explore today, and we're then going to find that very special trait that we will use as the heart of showmanship, the thing which will tie together the germinal form back in the ancient times and what it is today. And last episode we spoke about the evolution of the whale, and the thing which ties together the Pakicetus, the four-legged dog-like animal that walked the shores of the world about 50 million years ago. The thing that ties that together so that we know that it is this dog-like animal that has become the humpback whales and all the whales and dolphins of the sea today. The way we know that is by a very peculiar construction of the inner ear bones of the Pakicetus, which we find in no other mammals, but that we find developed through the genealogy or all the different fossils that traces the history of the whale. And that is the secret behind the name, the inner ear of showmanship. Today we are seeking what is the specific feature which I think is so unique to showmanship that when we trace it back, when we find the origin of this particular feature, how will we then know that that is the actual origins of it? And it needs to be special, just like this particular inner ear bone is. And for those of you who clicked on the links from last time, there is an episode there. There is a link to the episode from the PBS Evolution show from a bunch of years back, where there's a whole episode specifically about the whale evolution, and they talk about this inner ear bone. So now let's dive into the world of ideas and see if we can find the heart of the inner ear of showmanship. Oh, but before I play that little bit of music there that I normally do, I would just like to tell you to listen to the outro of today. I am launching a campaign on Instagram, and I think you might like to know about it. I mentioned it in brief last episode at the end for those few of you who actually listens to the outro, where I sometimes have saved up some gems. So either you listen to it all the way to the end, or you just skip right to the end and get that little raisin in the sausage saved all the way in the back. So let's dive into the world of ideas and play that sweet little tune. And there we had that sweet little tune. And now let's look at what showmanship is. And this is something that we've gone through at great length, because the whole second season of The Way of the Showman, I sketched out an approach to understanding what showmanship is and who the showman is, and I laid this out there at great length, which is from episode 24 to episode 64. So over those 40 episodes, you'll be able to get the full scope and all the details and little detours along that way of exploration. But so I won't rehash all of that here in detail, but I will do a brief outline so that we know what we're talking about when we talk about showmanship, and so that we can zoom in on what key features we will hold on to as a sort of red thread going back into the ancient times to find the origins of it, or, as I mentioned, the inner ear of showmanship. So, commonly, showmanship is described as the way a performer presents what they do, and this way is supposed to be a pleasing and entertaining manner, light-hearted. It's closely connected with entertainment. A showman is very often an entertainer, since showmanship in many ways is the ability to be able to present something with a kind of flair which makes crowds happy and excited. And one of the dictionary definitions of showmanship describes it as the ability to do things in a lively and enthusiastic way that attracts attention. I like that. It has some key words from the season 2 of enthusiasm. It talks about attention and attracting attention, and as we will look a little bit on here a little bit later in this essay, lively is also a very good word here. And the Google Dictionary's definition of showmanship has a sort of example sentence to show how the word is used. How does one use the word showmanship? And the sentence that it has is Bud, which is then, I take, being the name of the showman here, which already gives you a sense of what kind of demographic or kind of dude that this showman actually is. So he says Bud had a flair for showmanship and understood what the public wanted to see. A performer or a showman in this sense is it's someone who understands what the public or an audience want, and then how they want it presented to them. But, Bud, wouldn't surprise me if the flair that he had for showmanship was to how to present the used cars that he wants to sell to them. So, but these things are true and good descriptions, which captures the essence of how a showman presents their material. It captures it well, but it is not, I don't think that this is the most fundamental way to describe what showmanship is. I believe that before any material is presented, whether it is a sale pitch for a car, whether it is a piece of poetry that's being read at a poetry slam, or it's a theatre play or a juggling act, and before we can talk about how that material is to be presented, I think that the act of showmanship necessitates that human beings are arranged in a certain relationship. And in its most archetypal expression, this relationship is like a group of people that are gathered before one person that's facing them. A group of people facing someone in shared attention. And I think this is the structural foundation that makes showmanship possible. So before we can think of how a presentation is done, pleasing, lively, enthusiastic, or otherwise, there must be an audience-showman relationship. There needs to be at least one showman, someone who has something to show, and that can get the attention, and then there needs to be someone watching, which is the audience. And I think this structure is more fundamental than how it is to be presented. Though that is also true, as I said. It's like when you're using showmanship, you are considering the audience's experience, keeping that in mind, and you are using that to help you guide you into how you are presenting whatever it is that you want to present. So in common parlance, when people normally talk about showmanship, it's often used in reference to the so-called lower art forms, such as commercial theatre, street performance, circus, and variety arts. Or, as we've touched upon before, it can also have the flavor of the sort of huckster or hype merchant, like when you see it sometimes on the street or on like a fair or something where a person is selling steak knives. Check out these steak knives, rubber brooms, or check out how these Steak knives can chop nails as well as slice tomatoes. And it has these kinds of things. It's like I got a good friend who's an excellent rubber broom seller. Use it wet, use it dry. Last broom you'll ever buy. It's not just a broom. It's a tool. It's a tool, fellas. That kind of stuff. This is like you're selling steak knives or you're selling rubber brooms, but it has the flair of showmanship. It's sold in a particular way, and that's how what people think of it as. This sort of a used car dealer like we talked about. So in this kind of common perception of showmanship, we could say that they are making a general mental map of the territory of showmanship. We spoke about this last time, that the map is not the same as the territory, and this is not a pipe and all that with Magritte. And the map of the territory that people make of showmanship is that it is but a tool to please the masses, to pander to their lowest common denominator. This lies in there, often unspoken, but it was like, the show was just mainly hyperbole and showmanship. They didn't have any real content. So that is a common aspect of it, and as we do here along the way of the showman, is to take things more seriously. Take particularly showmanship more seriously, since we are viewing the world through the lens of showmanship. We don't want to lose it through, or we don't want to use the lens of showmanship and have the lens actually be some crappy little plastic thing that you get in a dime bag when you buy a thing at a carnival. We want ground glass of the highest, maybe even crystal, ground by the finest lens makers. So to do that, I am suggesting that if the skill of a showman is to know what his audience wants and how to present it to them so that they enjoy it, then a great showman, a master showman, would be able to go beyond the lowest common denominators. Like, of course, if you've just started out and you're a novice and you don't quite know, then you will just use all the techniques. Do you want to see it? Yes. Are you sure you want to see it? Yes. Are you really sure you want to see it? Hey, we have stopped to watch, so just assume that we want to watch it, or else we're going to walk away. You will use these simple tools to and you'll make fat jokes, or you'll make dick jokes, or you'll make whatever. That just is the lowest common denominator, speaking directly to the populace. So, but if you imagine that the showman takes his craft seriously and that wants to aspire to say more important things, or that see their life as and their role as more important than just selling steak knives or just being cholera movement in the corner of an event, then you would imagine that to be able to truly understand what people want, not just the lowest common denominator, the next step would be to step up your interest in human nature and try to work out what people really want, and not just what they want, but also what they need. So if you are a master showman and you take it upon yourself to be a master showman, then you need to be able to go beyond the lowest common denominator and to know what people want and how they would want it presented to them. To be able to do that, you need a certain level of understanding of human nature. A master showman, I argue, will be one who is able to know his audience. Also, if it's made up of intellectual academics, or of spiritual leaders, or politicians, artisans, or merchants, to be able to present something in a lively and enthusiastic manner that captivates a group of people is something that we see many places, like at pulpits, from a preacher, from a priest. We see it at the red circle carpet of a TED Talk conference. We see it in university lecture halls, as well as on street corners and market squares with street shows and whatnot, theatres and circus big tops. And the nature of what's presented could actually be anything, from dance to politics to education to circus to science to poetry recitation. Showmanship is the skill of presenting material in any form in an engaging manner. And we do that by knowing what people need and what people want. Because the task of the showman or artist, paraphrasing Alan Moore, the comic book writer of Watchmen and Vendetta and Providence more recently. So paraphrasing Alan Moore, he says that the artist's job, or I can say the showman's job, is not just to give people what they want, but to give them what they need. And I like to believe that a master showman does not need to pander to the lowest drives of human beings. A master showman is one who has a genuine desire to know others and to connect with them and wants to enrich his audience of fellow travelers through the medium of their shows. And the dynamics of the relationship between the one who shows and the ones who watch varies greatly. For instance, a teacher and her students have a very different relationship with different expectations placed on each other than, say, a comedian and his audience. The kind of effort a university lecturer expects from her students that she expects them to put in to be able to grasp what it is that she's lecturing about is very different from the effortless process of paying attention which a stand-up comedian audience or stand-up comedy audience expects from a comedian. So the kind of material presented in a showing can be practically endless, and the form and structure of the presentation has its own rules and norms, varying significantly from venue to venue. And the showman's craft is the art of presenting material in such a way that it resonates with a particular audience, regardless of venue and setting. And this, of course, there are certain things that can be transferred from one to the other, but there are also lots of subtle and not so subtle differences in this, and the master showman interests himself or herself with this and trying to understand what it is that lives in the heart of the people that he or she talks to. Now, the task of the showman and the purpose of showmanship, I think, could be said to be to enliven whatever is being presented. And this word enliven, I think this is a good word, which is why I have chosen it. That is, to enliven something is to infuse something with life, to make something come alive, and to make material come to life in and for the audience. Make the material come to life in the audience and make the material come to life for the audience. And let's just pause for a second to look at that word, enliven. I like that word. And the common meanings of to enliven something, it beautifully mirrors the shallow common use of showmanship. Because today, enliven just means to make something more interesting, more entertaining or appealing. Whilst the etymology of the word tells us that in 1630, when the word was first recorded, it meant to give life to, or to restore to life, or to put life into. And this makes the Google Dictionary's second listed use of the word the way it can be used to describe the act of making someone more cheerful or animated. If you enliven something, then that is the act of making something more cheerful or animated. And to look at it like that makes a whole lot of sense, because the life-giving, if we talk about that like it's like to give life to or restore life to or to put life into, which the 1630 use of it was, so we keep that life-giving meaning fresh in mind, then we're primed to notice that the words cheerful and animated also seems to capture a link between being notably happy and optimistic, which is cheerful, and being full of life and excitement, which is the definition of being animated. So we have this happy, optimistic, cheerful, full of life and excitement, and animated. All of these things, all these words that we now find here when we're looking for enliven and when we look for entertainment, and we look at these words, they all sort of seem to circle around so that we see a deep connection between how the phenomena of entertainment, which is something that enlivens people or enriches them and then makes them feel good, that is also what I think are some of the actual vibrant qualities of life itself, being animated. I don't know if life is always cheerful, but I certainly would think so. And I like it, as I'm going to quote and talk a bit about Humankind, this book, I do think that one of the roles that we have as performers as well is also to have this enlivening and having this noticeably happy and optimistic kind of atmosphere. And you can even have that when you're doing dark clowning or whatever, but that it has this sort of element of hope in it. And maybe it's also that I'm certainly thinking that now with we're living in dark and troubled times filled with a lot of war and whatnot. So I don't think we need any more darkness. So this is fresh on my mind. And I like to see cheerful, animated, restoring to life, give life to, or to put life into, that this is an aspect, an important aspect of what we do with material and how we present it to other people, and that these things are aspects of life itself. So in summary of what showmanship is, then we can say that showmanship consists of a showman, and a showman is one who faces the other way. The audience are those who, facing him, willingly and effortlessly gives him their attention. The nature of this encounter between audience and showman should engage and interest the audience, should enliven them, and ultimately, if successful, leave them enriched. So my expanded view of showmanship, that goes beyond just presenting things in a pleasing and fun manner, is that showmanship is a reciprocal process of attention between one presenting something in an enlivening manner to a group of others. Showmanship is a reciprocal process of attention between one presenting something in an enlivening manner and a group of others. So take that for what it is. So if this perennial structure here of human interaction, one facing many, and that, if this is the trunk from which all the many branches and twigs and the 10,000 leaves of shows and performances of all kinds sprout from, then the roots of this structure clearly emerged way before its current manifestation in street shows, on market squares and theaters and circus and what have you. This human interactional structure must have emerged way back in our evolutionary history. So in the following essay, in today's episode, I will attempt to go as deep as possible to find the very beginning. I'm not going all the way there today. I'm just basically shaping it out today. So we're not getting to the beginning just yet. We don't get to the beginning for not next episode until we start really looking at play. So in 2 episodes from now. But I do so search for the beginning by seeking the aspects of human development that made it possible for us not just to communicate straightforward information, like the best place to find clean water is beyond that hill, but the kind of communication which brings into being a collective experience which is more than the sum of its parts. It's not just the best place to find water is beyond that hill. You go up there and then over to the left. But in statements that become something more, like saying, beyond the wild blue yonder lies the deep ancient well of the purest water. That is expressing something different. Possibly. It could also just be a poetic way of saying, you get the water over there, but mate. But in the meeting of the one facing the other and the many others, there is room for more than just passing of stripped down information. And I am interested in the particular affordance that the shared attention of showman and audience, shaman and tribe, parent and child has. This is the emergence of a new kind of shared experience, the coming into being of a new kind of reality. And this state of shared attention is different from and is so much more than the everyday necessities of life. And this experience, what happens when a showman regales an audience, is what we in showbiz call a show. So we see the show here now like the ancient well of purest water, like the show. A showing is something more than just a juggling act or making a balloon animal. But just like with the word showmanship, like I just said, I use the term show in an expanded and more inclusive way. And in this space between showman and audience, I believe we find the origins of performative arts like dance, storytelling and painting, but also the wellspring of mythology, religion and even science, and indeed all aspects of human culture. And if this is the case, and I believe it is, then we again see that its origins must lie very deep indeed in our ancient history, probably even predating our ability to communicate with language, and perhaps predating even the origins of our own species, as we shall see. So let's try and sort of talk a little bit more about this, and we're going to go towards the imaginal realm. Because, as we mentioned last time, things transform over time, and change is a fundamental part of existence. Time flows, and through time some things persist for a long time, like mountains and continents, and some for shorter times, like turtles, oak trees and people. And over millions of years continents drifts, and mountains rise and wither, turtles are born and die, and trees sprout from acorns, and they stretch their majestic crowns towards the sun and eventually shrivel up or get struck by lightning. Everything is in continuous flux. And with this in mind, if we seek something far back in time, we need to have a strong idea of the nature of what the current thing is, so that we can recognize it through its inevitable metamorphosis going back in time, and what we defined as the inner ear bones connecting Pakicetus with the humpback whale, or the inner ear bones of showmanship. So we've already sketched an outline of what showmanship is. So let us now try and pinpoint some of the deeper relevant features of what the nature of a show is. Because as it is, the particular shared experience between the showman and the audience, which I believe to be the central feature or inner ear bones, we will use to find the origin of showmanship. This is different, a different kind of experience, which is key to understanding the difference between a male peacock or a male bird of paradise, the kind of displays that they do, and it separates this from the human shows, be it productions of Hamlet or lessons in geometry or a coach's rousing speech to his team in the netball finals. So let's look a little closer at what happens when a showman and an audience meets and a show happens. Because the show is a different kind of way, a different way of being in the world, which affords us access to the realms of imagination. It's the place where stories come alive, where things and actions means more than what they do in everyday life. It's a place of symbols. And of course, we all know what a show is when we see one, but when we try to uncover the ontological nature of what happens when an audience experiences a performance, we will find more than just the fun and games of modeling balloons and sparkly outfits. That's what makes up its bones. It's something more, and a show is way more serious than it first appears on the surface. which is what we will later on discover about play as well, which is also more serious than it appears on the surface. And the way I see it, a show is co-created by a showman and an audience. It's the reciprocal process of attention. Between the performer and the audience, a new layer of reality emerges, a purely human realm. The showman has a role to play, and the audience another. One is showing, the other watching. When a showman recites a poem for a willing audience, a particular kind of listening and perceiving takes place, an open and active participation, a kind of active passivity. The audience is paying attention, and if we again look at what lies at the root of the word in its original Latin form, attendere, which they maybe it's pronounced like that, but it's written attendere. Then we find that the literal meaning of attendere in Latin is to stretch towards. To attendere is to stretch towards something, and today's use, the notion is to stretch one's mind towards something. But when there's the attention, the TV is on, so I stretch my mind towards that. But when I picture the subtle act of really paying attention, like when you really listen to a piece of music, or when you're caught in rapt and acute attention to a baby or a child, then the stretching out, the reaching out, is maybe more like truly acknowledging something for what it is, or someone else for what they are. It is to open myself, or open oneself to the simple fact that there is something other than you, and you want to connect to it. Or in the case of the child, it's not something, but someone, and that you really want to get to know them. To really attend is a state of reaching out, not to press yourself onto someone or something, but it's a reaching out for whatever the other reveals of themselves to you. You will not exhaust or grasp the full nature of a child, or the poem, or the music piece. But in this kind of reaching out, you're not asking to know everything. You are simply wanting what's given. There is something selfless, I think, in this kind of act of attention, which at its heart I believe to be a form of love. And we'll get deeply back to that topic later on, of how closely this is related to love. But to attend in this way, it's to reach out in a fragile frame of desiring to receive the other. Now, how often this kind of attention actually happens in a fringe show or a street show or even a concert of Bach's Goldberg variations, I don't know. But be that as it may, I still believe that the core truth of the matter of attention still lies in this sphere, a genuine desire to know another. An audience watching performance is simultaneously taking in what originates in the showman's mind, and how it's expressed outwards in his ideas and his skills, and how they are shaped to express something, and how it's been put together in certain ways. This, what the showman does and what's happening in the performance, is being received by the audience. But they're taking in what they see and they hear and they sense that comes from without, whilst constantly also being aware of what kind of feelings and thoughts and experiences that this gives rise to within themselves. And the words of the poem are not just strings of sounds, not just words threaded like a child randomly threading wooden beads into a necklace. The words and their carefully crafted order has a deep three-dimensional organic structure. It's not a definite, straightforward description, like in a dishwasher manual. The poem is a multitude of meanings, and it will manifest itself differently in each of the listeners. Yet there is not one in the crowd who grasps the, quote, real truth, and another which grasps a truth which is wrong. Each one of the ways that the poem manifests itself in each of the people that are listening to it, they're all true. And the way each listener connects to the poem, to their own horizon of experiences and thoughts, is a right manifestation of the poem. The poem is all those things, and regardless of the size of the crowd, the poem will, in its subtleties and implicit meanings, be more than the sum of all those experienced truths. The inexhaustive possibilities of a poem exist in a realm other than normal experience, a place where stories live, where truths are expressed in myths and archetype, or recurring perennial patterns of enduring relevance to human beings. It's the space of Jung's archetypes, and it's the realm of art. The realm of the showman, I could even add. When I first fleshed out these ideas, and I went from being just one idea amongst many to being my key understanding about the nature of what I do as a showman or performer, this idea of a third realm, a realm in addition to the everyday realm of the showman and audience, in as much as we can talk of an audience as one entity, this became absolutely fundamental to me. And I discovered and uncovered it through my own experience, thinking about what I was really doing. What am I really doing when I'm performing 8 shows a week for more than a decade, touring with La Clique and La Soirée? And I came up with this way of thinking about what the phenomena of a show really was, but I was very far from the first person to express it like this. Very far indeed. And I had my own very idiosyncratic discovery of this realm, but I've since found that it's been described in greater detail and by much greater minds than mine, like Carl Jung, the philosopher Hans-Georg Gadamer, and also the French philosopher, theologian, and professor of Islamic studies, Henri Corbin, or Henri Corbin, who we will look a little bit closer at now, and his idea of the imaginal realm. So what I, due to my own biases as circus, sideshow, performing showman, I've called the show realm, Henri Corbin, or Henri Corbin. I should just say Henri Corbin because I like the sound of that. It sounds like some character out of a Bukowski story. So what I call show, Henri Corbin calls the imaginal realm. And when I read his writing about the imaginal realm, I believe he is describing the same kind of interrelational space that emerges in a performance. I have described and think of this realm as a place where stories and myths and shows live, or perhaps even that shows open up to us in this realm. But Henri Corbin goes on one step further in his use of the word. For him, the imaginal realm is where spiritual realities can be accessed through visionary experience, where abstract concepts can take on real corporeal meaning. And in a sense, it is the realm where we experience meaning, where depth and essence, we experience the meaning and depth and essence of the material world. It's like things just are, but we understand them and understand their depth and essence and meaning in this realm. Then Henri Corbin insisted that the imaginal was real, even more real or more fundamental than the physical realm. It wasn't imaginary in the sense of being unreal or just made up. Corbin argued that the imaginal realm was an objective realm that could be accessed by individuals through the human faculty of imagination. But the kind of imagination that he talks about is not the frivolous form of imagination which the poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge called fancy, which is the mere sort of combination and juxtapositioning of images and ideas. Coleridge described fancy as associative, in that it just connects seemingly random concepts and perceptions. This in itself is not exclusively negative, but Coleridge wanted to distinguish this process of fancy, of associative recombination, from what he called imagination. And imagination for Coleridge was the human capacity associated with creativity and the power to shape and unify what was given to us through our senses and our thinking. So our imagination captures wholes. It grasps and unifies concepts and perceptions into wholes, whilst fancy combines fragments or parts. And I'm using the word fragments here because the word part still kind of has in it the connotation of a whole, like as if the parts, when you combine them, you unify them into a whole. Like connect the parts and then you have a new whole that's emerged. Whilst I think it's more accurately to say that if we gather 7 fragments, they become a kind of collage rather than a true whole. Anyway, this goes a little bit off to the side here. But when Corbin, that's just to try to capture what these things are. Like, so imagination, according to Coleridge, is how you actually perceive the world. It's you connect the things together that forms out the tree. This act of recombination of things, and you go, oh, this is what makes out the whole of the tree. Of course, it will continue to give you new things the more you look at it, but that's a little bit beside the point. But so when Corbin says that what allows us to connect to the imaginal realm is neither the senses nor the faculties of our physical organism nor the pure intellect, but our active imagination. He is talking about the same kind of imaginative process which allows human beings to perceive reality in whatever limited form we can grasp it. Because imagination is the human capacity which allows us to experience the world. And it means that the way that we understand the world is a participatory process. The way it's shaped, it's like we talked about last time about how we attend to something will actually shape what that thing is for us. So, and this is what's happening in a show. When the performer is presenting something, if the shared attention is in a particular way, then the audience will be able to see much more in the performance than just the straightforward. When I'm reading the manifesto, it just sounds like, on one level, a description of what the showman does when he does a show, but imbued with a reciprocal, imaginative understanding of it, you will see so much more. And I know I make that happen sometimes, so it's totally possible. As for the nature of the imaginal realm, when I first became aware of that show is another kind of reality, like a realm unto itself, which emerges when human beings come together in joint attention in a very particular state of participatory perception, not so easily arrived at with the rational mind. That was a mouthful, wasn't it? But when I first became aware of these shows as a thing in itself, I imagined it as something which was created by us. But Corbin might seem to think, I'm no expert on Corbin or whatever, but from my understanding of his ideas, it is that he thinks it actually has an independent existence outside of us. And as I contemplate it now, I believe that the truth might be somewhere in between, or perhaps both. It's got an aspect of the archetypal in it, with structures that happens in that you can discover and rediscover at different levels of reality. But going further into this is well and truly outside of the questions that we want to answer. So I got my experience of this realm through the seemingly frivolous art of circus, magic, and entertainment. And when I tell someone that I see the true nature of a show as a realm that emerges between a showman and his audience, then it's quite likely that that person will just shrug his shoulders and say, oh, well, yeah, and so what? Fair enough. These thoughts are perhaps of a different kind than the average person has about circus or its allied arts. But what I hope to have shown with these explorations is that a show is not a trivial thing. That in fact, it is the emergence of a level of existence, a state of being which is unique to human beings. No other animal experiences the world and experience a show like what we can, or a showing, or the imaginal realm. And that in this state or realm, all that we care most about as human beings, all that we care most about that exists within this realm, aspects of culture. It is in this realm that words join together into stories, words join together to poems, where different tones form a melody. It's not just random sounds following each other, but they form melodies that fill you with emotion, and where noises from several instruments come together to form harmonies. This, the area of the show, the realm of the show, is where meaning resides. And for our immediate quest for the origin of showmanship, I believe that this space between the imaginal realm, I imagine that this is the inner airbone, the red thread feature that we seek, that we will grab onto and seek the origins of. And we're going to look further into that next episode, before we fully delve into play and how these things relate up. So, for now, we'll end it right there. And I mentioned in the beginning of this thing that we are going to have a campaign. It's a giveaway campaign where I, as host and guide along the way, would like to give away the t-shirts that we have that displays the fantastic logo of this here podcast, which was so expertly crafted by my wife, Miranda. And how can you get a free t-shirt shipped to wherever you are in the size that you might most like, so that you get the best fit? It is by going over to Instagram and follow me on Instagram, and then you will find there very soon a post where I will outline the details, and it doesn't require anything more than sending me a direct message with your size and requirements. There's got to be a shipping address so that I know where to send it to. So yeah, let that be an instigation to sign up over on Instagram and get yourself some sweet Way of the Showman apparel. And with that, all that's left to say is take care of yourself and those you love, and I hope to see you along the way.